I walked into the gala like I belonged there, even though every fiber of my body told me I didn't. The ballroom shimmered with crystal chandeliers, polished marble floors, and a sea of tuxedos and designer gowns. I wore a sleek black dress that hugged my curves in all the right places, and heels that could double as medieval torture devices. But it wasn't the shoes that hurt most. It was the eyes. They didn't look at me. They looked through me. This was the world. My husband, Jonathan, came from old money, tight circles, and unspoken rules I was never handed the manual to. And though he'd wrapped his arm around my waist like a promise, I could feel the tension in his shoulders, the way he subtly steered me away from certain conversations and whispered, "You don't have to prove anything tonight." But I did. God, I wanted to, because Victoria was watching. Jonathan's mother stood near the silent auction table in a cream gown that cost more than my first year of college. Her face didn't move when she looked at me, polite, poised, unreadable, but her eyes scanned me like I was a line item on a spreadsheet she'd rather erase. Next to her, Amanda sipped champagne and smiled like she knew a secret the rest of us weren't worthy of hearing. This was my beginning, but it wasn't where my story began. 3 years earlier, I was trying to hail a cab in downtown Chicago on a Tuesday that couldn't decide if it wanted to be rainy or apocalyptic. I'd just walked out of a brutal pitch meeting with a potential client, my laptop dead, my backup files corrupted, and my favorite blazer carrying the scent of desperation and cheap office coffee. And then, it happened. A BMW splashed through, a puddle the size of Lake Michigan, soaking me head to toe. My slides, notes, and mood were now drenched. I let out a loud, "You've got to be kidding me." As the car screeched to a stop, a man jumped out. "I am so sorry," he said, breathless. I didn't see the puddle. He was tall, well-dressed, and looked exactly like the kind of man who never had to apologize. His hair was slightly messy in a deliberate, expensive way. He had one of those voices that made you want to listen, even when you were furious. "I think your puddle saw me," I snapped, holding up my dripping portfolio like evidence. He laughed. "I deserve that. Look, let me make this up to you. There's a coffee shop across the street. I'll help you salvage your presentation. Get you a fresh cup of whatever your soul needs right now. And if you'll allow me replace your dress." I narrowed my eyes. "Are you hitting on me, or are you just pathologically helpful? Can't it be both?" That was Jonathan. That we spent 2 hours rewriting my slides, while I vented about my firm, my clients, my unreliable intern, and the stress of running a business people didn't take seriously because I was young, black, and a woman. He listened, genuinely, asked smart questions, laughed at my jokes. And when I finally leaned back in my chair and looked at the time, I realized I didn't want the conversation to end. He paid for my dry cleaning and bought me a new dress the next day. I found out later he was the CEO of a tech firm valued in the billions, but in that coffee shop, he was just the guy who showed up when I needed someone to remind me I mattered. I didn't tell him about my background right away, how I'd grown up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Southside Chicago with a mum who worked 3 jobs and a dream that refused to die, how I studied by candlelight when our lights were cut, and shared one cracked laptop with 2 younger siblings. I wanted him to know me, not the story people liked to turn into inspiration porn. But he wasn't like most people. He asked about my firm Destiny strategies. He didn't flinch when I talked about contracts with Fortune 500 companies. He was impressed that I had 15 employees. He didn't look surprised. I loved that. We didn't fall fast. We fell right. Weekend drives, late-night tacos, debates about business models and community reinvestment, talks about pressure, family, ambition. I told him how a professor once told me I'd be better off in a vocational school. He told me how he sometimes felt trapped in the cage of his family name. It was 6 months in when he sat across from me at our favorite rooftop bar and said, "Destiny, I need to tell you something about my family." I sipped my drink. "Let me guess, you're royalty. Secret heir to the Chicago Mafia. You collect taxidermy." He smiled, but his eyes were serious. "They're not going to understand us. They're not going to understand you. I'm falling in love with you, and I don't want their ignorance to hurt you." I remember staring at him, stunned. It wasn't that I didn't believe him, it was that I thought I could handle it. I was used to proving myself, to earning my space in rooms I wasn't invited into. I thought love would be enough. It wasn't. The first time I met Victoria and Amanda, I wore a navy sheath dress, pearl earrings, and the pumps that gave me blisters every time but looked like class. I wanted to impress them. I wanted to walk into that mansion and make them say, "She's perfect for him." Victoria opened the door herself. Unusual, I thought. She looked at me the way an appraiser might look at a forged painting searching for cracks. "So," she said, smiling with her mouth but not her eyes, "you're Jonathan's friend." Friend, like he hadn't proposed to me just the week before, like we weren't sharing a mortgage and a life. Amanda waltzed into the foyer, in leggings that cost more than my rent used to be. "Destiny," she said, like she was trying out a new seasoning. "That's Anne ... Interesting name. Is it short for something?" I gave my usual answer. "No. My mum named me that because she said I was destined for great things." "How sweet," Victoria said, with the warmth of dry ice. I tried. God, I tried. I told them about my firm, about my latest contract. I talked about my team, my strategies, how I'd scaled my business from $500 and a dream to 7 figures. Victoria nodded politely. "Small businesses are so important to the economy." "Small." Amanda smiled with her teeth. "Ever been to the Hamptons?" "No, not yet." "You must go," she said, cocking her head. "Though I suppose it's not really your scene." My scene. That night, driving home with Jonathan, I stared out the window and said nothing. He broke the silence. "I'm sorry, they're not usually like that." But we both knew that wasn't true. The wedding came 8 months later. Beautiful, elegant, and cold as stone in places that should have been warm. During the reception, I overheard Amanda tell her cousin, "Well, at least she's pretty." And I suppose Jonathan wanted someone who could give him children with rhythm. It felt like a slap. But I smiled. I danced. I played the role, because that's what women like me were taught to do, make others comfortable, even in our own skin. In the months that followed, I stopped being invited to family dinners. I saw photos of brunches I hadn't known about. Every interaction felt like a test I didn't study for. Jonathan noticed, but instead of confronting it, he tried to fix it quietly. "I think they're just adjusting," he said. I nodded, but a part of me began to shrink. Maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe they were right. But then I heard my mother's voice in my head. "Baby, you don't shrink yourself to make other people comfortable. You belong wherever you choose to be." That's why I said yes when the invitation came. The Children's Hospital, charity gala, the event of the season. "You don't have to go," Jonathan said gently, but I did. I had to stop letting them define me by how little they thought of. I wore black, not because it was safe, but because it made a statement. My diamonds sparkled. My hair was flawless. I walked into that ballroom not as a shadow, but as a woman who had finally remembered who she was. And that was the night Amanda took the microphone. That was the night everything changed. Marriage didn't change much, at least, not where it mattered. Jonathan and I returned from our honeymoon to a flurry of polite congratulations, staged smiles, and gifts that were more symbolic than sincere. A crystal vase from Victoria, a handwritten card from Amanda that read, "Welcome to the family, make it count." It wasn't a welcome. It was a warning. At first, I tried to pretend it didn't bother me. I told myself they just needed time, that eventually, they'd see I wasn't some gold digger or charity case. That love would soften their edges. But weeks turned into months, and the silence between us thickened like smoke in a locked room. They never said anything outright. That was the trick. Victoria never told me I didn't belong. She simply forgot to add my name to dinner invitations. Amanda never called me names. She just posted photos from family events I hadn't known about and tagged everyone but me. It was racism wrapped in pearls and politeness. Classism cloaked in heritage and heritage. Brands. And Jonathan, he really did. But trying wasn't enough. One Sunday morning, I found him in the kitchen staring at his phone, a look of frustration creasing his brow. "What's up?" I asked. "Pouring coffee." He sighed. "Mum's throwing a garden party next weekend. She wants me to come." "Okay, I'll pick out a dress." He hesitated. She didn't mention you." The coffee mug froze mid-air. "Did you ask if I was invited?" She said it was mostly just for her friends and some old colleagues, very casual, nothing personal. I smiled, bitter and tight. "Everything about your mother is personal." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I'll tell her I'm not going if you're not welcome." "You won't." "What? You won't. You'll go, and she'll get what she wants." Again, he looked wounded. "That's not fair." "No, I said quietly. It's not. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, trying to remember who I was before I became Jonathan's wife. I used to walk into boardrooms filled with suits and silence the room with one pitch deck. I used to mentor girls from my old neighborhood and remind them that they didn't need to change themselves to rise. I used to know exactly what I was worth. Now I was measuring it by whether Victoria deigned to speak to me at brunch. The worst part wasn't the exclusion. It was the erosion. Little by little, the comments chipped away at my spirit. At one fundraiser, Amanda smiled sweetly and said, "Destiny, you should meet Olivia. She runs a great non-profit for at-risk girls. You two probably have so much in common." At Christmas dinner, Victoria offered to give me etiquette books from when she was my age. During a wine tasting, a woman asked how Jonathan and I met. Before I could answer, Victoria cut in. "A charming little accident in the city. Jonathan's always had a heart for community outreach." Community outreach. I excused myself and locked myself in the powder room for 20 minutes, just to breathe. "You're too quiet lately," Jonathan said one night, as we sat in the living room, half watching a documentary. "I'm just tired." He muted the TV. "Talk to me." I hesitated. "I don't think they'll ever accept me." He shifted, uncomfortable. "That's not true, isn't it? When they look at me, they don't see your wife. They see a PR problem, a diversity footnote. Come on, they see someone who doesn't fit." And I'm starting to believe them. He took my hand, warm and steady. Don't let them take that from you." I'm not sure I had it to begin with. That night, I dreamt of my mother. She was standing in our old kitchen, hands dusted with flour, music humming from the radio. "When you walk into a room, baby," she used to say, "you don't ask for permission. You claim your space." She never let me believe I was small, never let me shrink, even when life was brutal, even when the lights were out and the landlord was knocking. She reminded me I was powerful, just by how she lived with grit, fire, and unapologetic pride. When I woke up, I cried into my pillow, quietly, so Jonathan wouldn't hear. I started noticing things that didn't add up. It began with Amanda. She'd moved out of her condo in the West Loop and back into the Lake Forest estate, citing renovations. But when I ran into one of her old neighbors at a networking event, the story was different. "Thought she'd be here," the woman said, "though I guess after losing the place, she's probably laying low." I frowned. Losing the place? She sold it fast. I figured she was downsizing, but who knows with these legacy types, right? Then there was Victoria. Always a woman of couture and jewels. She began appearing at events with more understated looks, repeating outfits, selling off pieces of the family art collection for charity. Jonathan was working longer hours. He came home distracted, avoided my questions with vague smiles and nothing to worry about. But I knew better. I built my business by reading between the lines, recognizing patterns, spotting trouble before it became crisis. And what I saw behind all the champagne and garden parties was a family in freefall, too proud to admit they were drowning. One afternoon, I stopped by Jonathan's office to drop off lunch. He'd left early for a meeting, but his assistant let me into the private conference room to wait. There were papers scattered across the table for Nentle's loan, documents, debt schedules. My eyes scanned the figures. Negative cash flow, restructured lines of credit, high-risk investments bleeding red, and then, the line that made my stomach twist, projected insolvency in under 6 months. Victoria's charity foundation was tapped out. Amanda's condo hadn't been renovated, had been liquidated. The Lake Forest estate, mortgaged to the edge. I sat in that chair, the silence pressing in, my heart pounding in my ears. And then something unexpected stirred in me. Not pity, not triumph, resolve. Because as much as they hated me, this was Jonathan's family, and Jonathan was my family. If they fell, he would fall with them, and I couldn't let that happen. That night, I made pasta and waited for Jonathan to come home. He kissed me on the cheek, distracted as always, and sat down at the table. "Busy day?" I asked. He nodded. "Non-stop. Anything you want to tell me?" His fork paused mid-air. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we're a team. If something's wrong with the family business, I want to help." His jaw tightened. "It's nothing you need to worry about." That's not an answer. It's complicated. So am I. He set the fork down. "Destiny, you don't trust me. That's not it. Then what is it?" He stood up and walked to the sink, facing away. "I'm trying to protect you." I got up slowly, went to him, laid a hand on his back. "You don't have to protect me, Jonathan. Just don't lie to me." He turned, and for a moment I saw it. All the shame, the fear, the weight of his lineage on his shoulders. "We're bleeding money," he said finally. "Decades of bad investments are catching up. My grandfather built something strong. My father gambled it away. And now I'm trying to fix it with duct tape and hope. Let me help. You've already got your own business to run. I have more than business. I have power, connections, clients who owe me favors, and most importantly, eyes that aren't clouded by legacy guilt." He searched my face. "I don't want you to get dragged into this. I already am." That night, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I started making calls, not as a wife desperate to be accepted, but as a woman who refused to let the man she loved be buried by the very people who refused to see her. The next morning, I woke before Jonathan. I lay beside him, staring at the ceiling, my mind turning like gears in a locked safe. The truth was undeniable now. The family was broke, and the empire they'd built their pride on this gleaming tower of prestige, tradition, and pedigree wasn't just crumbling. It was seconds from collapse. I looked at Jonathan, his face relaxed in sleep. The worry lines smoothed out for once. I knew he was hoping for a miracle. I also knew miracles rarely showed up unless you went out and built them. Quietly, I slipped out of bed, opened my laptop, and started digging. First, I confirmed the numbers I'd seen at his office. Then I dug deeper. Public filings, court records, property liens, investment holdings. I used every tool in my arsenal, tools honed from a decade of saving companies on the brink and navigating power games far uglier than this one. What I found made my stomach turn. The family's holding company, once valued in the hundreds of millions, was over-leveraged, outmaneuvered, and drowning. They'd taken massive loans based on projections that never materialized. Trusts were depleted. The Aspen property was gone, sold under a shell LLC, and quietly rented back for appearances. The foundation Victoria used to flaunt as a philanthropic jewel hollowed out, barely enough left to fund a hospital wing, much less a tax write-off. I felt equal parts fury and pity. They had judged me, mocked me, treated me like some outsider with too much ambition and not enough class, and yet I had something they didn't: liquidity. I stared at my own numbers. Destiny Strategies had gone global in the last 2 years. My personal investments, split between private equity, real estate, and high-yield assets, had crossed the 9-figure threshold last quarter. I wasn't just comfortable, I was powerful, and I had a choice to make. I started making calls. First, 2 people I trusted, quietly, carefully. Don't ask why. I told my friend Tanya, a mergers expert, but if you had to stabilize a mid-sized legacy firm on the brink of collapse, how would you structure the deal? Depends. Are we buying or bailing? Bailing, she paused. Silent partner. Silent ghost. I reached out to 2 of my top clients who owed me favors. I spoke to a banker who once told me I saved his career after a deal nearly derailed a $300 million merger, and I began to build a plan. I pitched a few lifelines discreetly to Jonathan. What if you refinanced through an outside firm? He shook his head. No one wants to partner with a sinking ship. What if someone bought the debt, restructured it, forgave a portion, stabilized the rest? He gave a humorless laugh. Who would do that? Someone who believes in family, someone who's tired of being treated like a ghost in her own life. He looked at me across the dinner table. I don't want to drag you into this. Destiny. You've built something incredible. Don't let my family's mess contaminate it. I smiled softly. You forget I built my firm cleaning up messes. But I knew that any overt offer from me would be rejected. Pride was thicker than blood in the Lancaster household. If Victoria found out I was behind a financial rescue, she'd rather let the company burn to ash than take my hand, so I took another route. I called my lawyer, Mr. Ellison. He was discreet, brilliant, and had helped structure several of my most confidential acquisitions. I need to create a holding company, I told him. Something clean, quiet, and completely disconnected from me. He didn't ask why. Name: Phoenix Holdings. He raised an eyebrow, rising from the ashes. On brand. It's personal, I said. Within 2 weeks, Phoenix Holdings was born, registered in Delaware, managed through a blind trust, scrubbed of any ties to Destiny Strategies or my name. I liquidated a portion of my long-term assets, $50 million. It barely made a dent in my portfolio, but it would be enough, more than enough. I bought out the debt, leveraged the family's assets into a stabilized package, paid off their most aggressive creditors, and forgave the entire balancor without them ever knowing it came from me. The final step was the hardest, letting it go. That night, I sat alone in my office, staring at the confirmation emails. $50 million, quietly, anonymously, gone. There would be no thank you, no seat at the table, no rewritten legacy. But I didn't do it for approval. I did it for Jonathan. I did it because I couldn't bear to watch him fall apart under the weight of a crumbling empire, while the women who raised him sipped cocktails and pretended everything was fine. I did it because I loved him, even if his family couldn't find it in their hearts to love me back. Weeks passed. I watched as the family slowly began to recover. Victoria smiled more easily at events, her jewels reappearing one by one. Amanda posted pictures from her newly redecorated guest suite, complete with self-care affirmations and morning light. Jonathan was lighter. He stopped coming home defeated. The pressure in his voice softened. "Looks like we're catching a break," he said one evening, pouring me a glass of wine. "The board is suddenly optimistic. Creditors backed off. Someone must be working overtime behind the scenes." I clinked glasses with him. Imagine that. But the distance between me and his family didn't narrow. In fact, it sharpened. Amanda made another dig at dinner. "Some people just stumble into wealth and think it means they understand legacy." Victoria sent a holiday card, addressed only to Mr. Jonathan Lancaster. Every week I gave, they took hand, still treated me like a placeholder, a mistake they were tolerating for Jonathan's sake. I had just saved their entire family from ruin, and I couldn't even get a return phone call from Victoria. One Friday afternoon, I arrived at a luncheon hosted by the hospital's fundraising board. As I entered, I overheard a group of women whispering, "Did you hear? Phoenix Holdings, whoever they are, just cleared the Lancaster debt. Total mystery. Well, they say someone's watching over them. Maybe they finally have a real ally." I smiled behind my sunglasses and kept walking. Let them wonder. A few days later, the invitation arrived. Heavy stock gold, leaf, Children's Hospital Gala. It was signed by Victoria. At the bottom, in tight cursive, a single line, "Attendance expected. Family representation required." Jonathan handed it to me like it was a fragile glass. "We don't have to go," he said. "You've endured enough." "No," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "I've endured just enough, but not a second more." And for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't showing up for them. I was showing up for me. The night of the gala, the city wore a coat of ice. Downtown Chicago gleamed with gold-lit windows and the hush of snow just beginning to fall. Inside the ballroom of the Hyatt Regency, everything was perfection. Crystal chandeliers, velvet curtains, champagne towers, a room full of money, legacy, and performance. Jonathan looked flawless in a tuxedo. I wore a black gown with a slit that whispered power, shoulders back, head high. My diamonds caught the light with every step. This time, I didn't follow behind him. I walked beside him. Victoria and Amanda stood near the entrance, greeting guests with the polished ease of women born into command. Victoria wore emeralds. Amanda dripped silver and confidence. "Destiny," Amanda said, kissing the air beside my cheek. "You look bold." I smiled. "You look the same." Her jaw tightened just slightly. Jonathan took my hand as we stepped into the crowd. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I said, "but let me know when they start handing out the knives." He gave me a nervous glance. "Don't do anything tonight. Please, relax. I'm just here for the children." The evening played out like a perfectly choreographed illusion. Wine flowed, speeches rolled, laughter was manufactured and recycled. Auction items flew off clipboards. Weekend in Paris, private yacht excursion, custom art, all in the name of charity and visibility. Amanda and Victoria circulated like political candidates. Jonathan followed, shaking hands, nodding at donors, thanking CEOs. And I smiled, floated, observed. But underneath the glitter and gloss, I felt it. The tension. I wasn't invisible tonight. I was being watched. People were wondering. People were talking. I caught snippets. "Isn't that Jonathan's wife? She runs a firm, right? I heard she's behind Phoenix Holdings." I gave them nothing. Not yet. Then, just as the desserts were being served and the orchestra softened into a string trio, Amanda stood and tapped her glass. I'd like to say a few words." A hush fell over the room as she stepped toward the stage and took the microphone. She looked radiant, practiced, unbothered, but I recognized the gleam in her eye. I knew what was coming. She turned to the crowd. "This gala means so much to our family," she began. "It represents tradition, responsibility, and legacy. All the things that built this city and our place in it." People nodded, sipped their champagne. "But tonight," she continued, her voice dipping, "I've been reflecting on how not everyone understands what it means to be part of something greater than themselves." Her gaze flicked toward me like a match striking flint. "Some people treat these spaces like trophies. They marry into families and assume that access equals understanding, that presence equals place." I didn't move, didn't blink. "Forget," Amanda said, "that real belonging is earned through generations of sacrifice, tradition, and discretion, not ambition." She paused, letting it hang in the air. "Some additions to families don't understand the importance of humility, of staying in their lane, of knowing when silence is more powerful than attention." I stood up. The chair scraped loudly across the marble floor. Amanda froze. All eyes turned to me. I walked toward the stage, heels clicking like a countdown. "Excuse me," I said, my voice calm and clear. "May I have that microphone?" She hesitated. I didn't. I reached for it. She let go. The weight of it settled in my hand like truth. I turned to face the room. Hundreds of faces. Wealth, power, influence, all waiting to see what the inappropriate addition would say. I smiled. "I want to tell you a story." A pause. "It's about a little girl who grew up in a housing project on the south side. Her mother worked 3 jobs. Some nights, they had to choose between food and electricity. They chose food. So, the girl studied by candlelight." A flicker of discomfort moved through the room. She was told she didn't belong in honors classes, that girls like her weren't meant for boardrooms. She didn't listen. She put herself through college, built a business from $500 and a dream, and now employs 15 people. She's been featured in Forbes, Businessweek, and the Wall Street Journal. I saw Amanda shift uncomfortably. Victoria's jaw clenched. But more than that, she built something no one could take away worth, not because of where she came from, but because of who she became. I let that hang. "That girl is me." A ripple of recognition. Murmurs. Jonathan sat frozen, breath caught in his chest. I looked directly at Amanda. "And when that girl married into a family that looked down on her, she tried to earn her place. She was kind, patient. She bit her tongue through slights and silence. She showed up always with grace." Amanda's face turned pale, but behind the scenes, while the family whispered and mocked and judged, they were falling apart. I turned to the crowd now, no longer speaking to Amanda. I was speaking through her. The legacy they brag about. Bankrupt, the homes mortgaged, the foundation empty. Gasps, audible gasps. And when she discovered the truth, when she saw the empire collapsing from the inside, she didn't gloat. She didn't walk away. Victoria stood up from her table. "This isn't the time or place." I held up my hand. "It is exactly the time." I looked at Jonathan. She reached out to her network. She brokered meetings, made calls. And when it still wasn't enough, I took a breath. She created a company, Phoenix Holdings. She liquidated $50 million of her personal portfolio. She bought the debt. She saved the family business. Silence, not the polite kind, the stunned, irrevocable kind. She did it anonymously, because she believed in protecting her husband. Even when his family refused to protect her. I let that sink in. Jonathan stood slowly. His face was unreadable. Victoria sat down. Hard. Amanda looked like she'd been slapped, and I wasn't done. "I've spent 3 years being dissected, dismissed, laughed at, not because of anything I did, but because of who you think I'm not." I turned to face Victoria. "You talk about legacy, but you nearly let it collapse because of pride." I turned to Amanda. "You talk about class, but class isn't inherited. It's chosen. It's how you treat people when you think they have nothing to offer you." I faced the room again. I didn't ask to be respected. I earned it. I didn't demand space. I made it. And I didn't save this family for applause. I did it for love. I glanced at Jonathan. "But from this moment forward, I will never again sit quietly while people try to make me small." I set the microphone down on the podium. "I'm not going anywhere. So if you plan to keep pretending I don't belong, prepare to be uncomfortable." I walked off stage. The ballroom erupted. Not in applause, not yet in chaos. Voices, whispers, shock, disbelief. Amanda looked shattered. Victoria stared straight ahead. UNMOVING. Jonathan met me halfway. He took my hand. Is it true? He whispered. I nodded. You saved us. I saved you. He looked at me with something I hadn't seen in months. Clarity. I should have stood up for you a long time ago. Yes, I said. You should have. I'm standing now. He turned to the room. And raised the mic. 3 days after the gala, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. When I answered, the voice on the other end was quiet, controlled, almost human. Destiny. This is Victoria. I said nothing. There's no easy way to say this, but Amanda and I would like to speak with you, in person, privately. She paused. At your office, if that's acceptable. They arrived Thursday morning. No driver, no entourage, just the two of them, dressed with less drama than usual. Victoria, in a dark wool coat, Amanda in jeans and an oversized sweater. I let them into the glass-walled conference room of Destiny's Strategies, where my assistant had placed fresh coffee, water, and zero excuses. Victoria sat first. I owe you an apology, she said plainly. My eyebrows lifted. I misjudged you, she continued. From the beginning, because I saw you as a threat, something I couldn't control or categorize. You didn't come from our world, and that terrified me more than I care to admit. Amanda sat silently beside her, picking at the corner of a napkin. I thought. Victoria added that by preserving tradition, I was preserving value, but what I really preserved was arrogance. I didn't speak. I wanted to hear Amanda say it. Finally, she looked up. I was jealous, she said, and insecure. You are everything I was raised to believe I was supposed to be, but you earned it. I inherited everything and still managed to lose most of it. Watching you build your life from scratch made me feel small, so I lashed out. I looked at both of them. No makeup, no masks. I don't need you to love me, I said, but if I'm going to remain in this family, I need you to respect me. I will not shrink for you. I won't pretend I haven't earned every single inch of space I take up. Victoria nodded slowly. We'd like to start over. I leaned back, arms crossed. I'm open to it, but understand there are no more second chances. It wasn't a cinematic reconciliation. There were no hugs, no tears, but there was truth, and that, finally, was enough. The following weeks were filled with strange moments of silence, not the heavy kind I had grown used to, but peaceful ones. Amanda texted me once, "Is this blazer professional or funeral chic?" I sent back, "Depends. Are you asking for a job or giving a eulogy?" She sent a laughing emoji. Progress. Victoria began including me in family planning emails. She never called me dear, which I appreciated. Her language shifted from icy formality to cautious collaboration. Jonathan and I started taking walks after dinner again. Real ones, no phones, just honesty. One night, we sat on our balcony, wrapped in a blanket. City lights twinkling below us. "I should have stood by you sooner," he said. "I thought I was protecting you. I realize now I was just avoiding the fight. You weren't the only one," I said. I let them chip away at me, piece by piece, and I smiled through it like it didn't hurt. "Not anymore," he whispered. "No," I agreed. "Not anymore." Word spread fast after the gala. Some people avoided me. Others looked at me with something like awe. The whispers became respect. The silence became space. And then, one afternoon, a letter arrived. It was handwritten, sealed with a soft pink sticker shaped like a flower. "Dear Destiny, my name is Alana. I'm a senior at Howard University, studying business. I saw the article about your firm in Black Enterprise, and I just wanted to say thank you." She went on to describe growing up with no mentors, no models, no roadmaps. She'd started a tiny e-commerce business that was struggling and had considered giving up. "But then I saw you speak your truth, and it reminded me of mine. So I'm still building, still showing up, still believing." At the bottom was a shaky signature. I folded the letter and sat in silence for a long time. A week later, I flew to DC and met her in a coffee shop near campus. She looked terrified when I walked in, nearly spilled her tea. "Relax," I said, grinning. "I'm not Beyoncé." She laughed nervously. "You kinda are though, like corporate Beyoncé." We talked for 3 hours, about business, fear, imposter syndrome, grit, goals, shame, and by the end, I said, "Send me your pitch deck. I want to invest." Her eyes filled with tears. "Why me?" Because someone once saw something in me before I saw it in myself, and I've never forgotten what that felt like. I think about that little girl from the South Side sometimes, the one who studied by candlelight, who dreamed of being seen. I wish I could tell her that the world would try to silence her, that love wouldn't always protect her, that power often comes dressed like cruelty. But I'd also tell her she's stronger than she knows, that her worth isn't up for negotiation, that her voice is a weapon and a gift, and that one day she'd take the microphone and set the room on fire. The Lancaster family isn't perfect, but they've changed. Amanda still rolls her eyes too much. Victoria still corrects people's grammar unnecessarily. But when they introduce me now, there's no hesitation, no qualifier. This is destiny, our family, and Jonathan. He stands beside me like a man who finally understands the weight of love. No more apologies. Just presence. The truth is, I don't belong in any room. I choose to be in them. And that choice, that unshakable decision to exist unapologetically, what defines me, not their names, not their money, mine. If you watched until the end, comment the word RISE, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with your friends and family.